Mark S. from the Recovered Podcast has sponsored this one. He went in to buymeacoffee.com/soberfriendspod, and he bought us a coffee. So, Mark, this show is for you. I'm Matt.
Hey, I'm Steve.
Hey, I'm John.
This is the Sober Friends Podcast. We're here for the sober curious, the new guy, and the old timer. Here to talk about the stuff anyone looking to live alcohol-free has to face day to day, and how we overcame those struggles. We speak for no 12-step group, but we do try to remain anonymous. You're not alone. This is the Sober Friends Podcast. Our goal here is to be self-supporting to help the new guy. And so we set a Buy Me a Coffee account. We've had it up for actually quite a bit of time, and Mark was really the first person to notice it. You can buy us a coffee at buymeacoffee.com/soberfriendspod, or you can go to soberfriendspod.com, and we're trying to save up for a better tool to record the podcast. We're using it now. We'll see if you can notice the difference. If it's important for you to get this in the ears of somebody still sick and suffering, the new guy, help us out. We want to be self-supporting. Tonight, we're going to talk about what it means to be sober. What does sobriety mean to you? Man, guys, this is a really open-ended one. John,
so I want
Steve, what's going on?
Today's a special day. One of our guests, episode 44, Kelly Giannuzzi, 1 year sober today. Kelly, way to go. Congratulations. Yeah.
Congratulations, Kelly.
Excellent. And
so I'm very happy that you went and got the episode number, because I wouldn't have had it.
And 1 year sober, that's a big deal. Let me tell you, it's a huge thing. I mean, we talk about, getting sober for a day, a week, a month. You get the 30-day, 60-day, 90-day chips. And after a while, you kind of get into the groove of things. But when you hit that 1 year mark, oh, man, the doors are open and the sky is the limit. And it's a big deal. Who'd have thought you can go 365 days straight in a row without taking a drink or a jug? Unbelievable. Good job, Kel.
Yeah, it's also that time where if you're used to taking like a monthly chip or something, that all of a sudden you got to wait a whole another year for your next chip. So
that's the downside.
Well, yeah, congratulations, Kel. Good job.
I used to look forward to that, the whole, wow, I'm not going to get a chip for a while. And it finally got to a point that I really stopped caring.
Oh, me too.
To me, it's a big deal to get a chip to show somebody else that it can be done. That's what it means to me now.
Me too.
It's great to see. I actually get a lot more from the people who are getting those monthly chips. And we have a few people in our home group who are starting to get up there towards the double digits in those monthly chips.
Yeah. Yeah.
So they're going to have to stop raising their hands to say, I have less than a year.
Yeah, that's always that nice thing when they cross over there from raising a hand and then raise their hand for those who have a year or more. It's always fun to see that.
Absolutely. I have read a study, and I looked at this. This kept me going for a while when I was new. I read some type of study that said if you can get to 5 years, that is the pivot point where it becomes more than a 50-50 shot you're not going to drink again. That it goes to like 51% once you get to 5 years, generally.
Mm-hmm.
I would agree to a point. I see a lot of, I know for me, it was about that 6-7 year mark. It was 6 years where, the shit hit the fan in recovery, being sober for 6 years and at rock bottom again, and being faced with that decision of drinking or not. And I've heard it, over the time that I've been sober. I've heard it a lot. It's that 5, 6, 7 year point where there's a huge change in somebody's recovery. They either catapulted into a new dimension, or they become stagnant, or some catastrophe, some big thing happens in their life. And again, it happens right about 15 through 18 years. It happens again. Don't know why. It's very common.
Yeah.
That's right.
7-year itch, baby.
Yeah.
Right.
And I can attest that anything over 18 hasn't bothered me. So I think that's the last milestone before, you just get into long-term sobriety and you just kind of go on overdrive and enjoy the ride.
Right. And then,
I had a tough 5 year. When I got to 5 year, I was kind of prepared for being at that 5 year period. That's when my mom died. And I really went into a place where I was just numb. I probably was numb for a good year and a half. And I know I was numb because when I came out of it, I could feel stuff again. It's like, whoa, I haven't been feeling anything in such a long time. Man, I was numb for a long time. So we were talking a little bit before we started taping. And Steve, you started reading a little bit about the definition of sobriety. So can be a great topic here, because sobriety could mean I don't drink, or it could mean something else. So as an example, I gave up drinking for 10 months back in 2001. It was me not drinking I remember that day I went out with a coworker and we had martinis. I had about 3 martinis, so I was flying high. I had wine at home, so I was drinking alone much of the night, and then I ran out of wine, and I felt this just emotional crash that I had a problem. But I never admitted I was an alcoholic, so therefore, I could quit drinking, but I could go back. So I decided to just stop drinking, and I didn't change anything. And I got to 10 months. I got to a breakup with a girlfriend, and I started drinking again, and I was off. But that 10 months was the longest I ever had. But man, it felt like I was holding on to the chair for dear life. I was not drinking by holding my breath, and looking around at the people drinking got me upset. What would we call that in AA?
I think we call it, you had a dry drunk going on.
Yeah, I think that's what I was.
Yeah, me too.
So was I not sober?
Well, there's a huge, I don't know, big discussion on it, the disparity or whatever. There's a misconception. I think misconception is probably a better word for it. I am a believer that just because you put the plug in the jug, wow, doesn't mean that you're sober. It means that they're dry. And dry, the definition of dry is you're not drinking and you're freaking miserable. You're angry, you're resentful, you're just pissed off at the world. You haven't made any changes to make life better. Sober is you've put the plug in the jug, and you're doing something about it. You're making changes in your life. If you're in a 12-step recovery, you're going to meetings. You get a sponsor. You read the literature. You take the commitments. If you're in other types of programs, you get involved. You start getting involved with that whatever group you're with, or whatever program you're using. You get involved. You make the changes. You seek out therapy if that's what you need, outside professional help. You get yourself a network of right-minded people on the same journey, on a same common goal, whether it's, sober moms or East Coast Sober Squad, Cal, and, you do something about it. Alcoholics Anonymous does not hold the monopoly to recovery. There's all sorts of things out there. It's just one of them.
Yeah, this subject hits home with me because, I've talked about it here before. Is I came into this program the first time. I had to come into this program more than once before I was able to figure it out. And when I came in the first time, sobriety meant to me that I removed alcohol from my life, and that's what I did. So I've said it when I did my story way back when. I've talked about it before, but so I removed alcohol. And I thought that just that one thing was going to start making my life better. And it did for a while, right? I mean, as soon as I removed alcohol, things got better. But there does come a plateau, at least it was for me. And about 4 years in, I started to notice, just like you said, Matt, like I started to realize that I'm feeling stuff again, and that there's some things going on. And, just like, we were talking about me. I had a 5-year crash that between my 5th and 6th year, I got divorced, right? And at the time, like I said, what I described as sobriety. And, today I look at it differently. Today I look at sobriety as being something way more complicated, way more, I don't know, intrinsic. I'm not sure what the word I'm looking for, but it's got a lot more to it. Like John just said, it has to have a lot more stuff around it, because I could remove the alcohol. And if I don't fix it, and again, we're talking about the real alcoholic here. We're talking about when I remove the alcohol, doesn't stop me from thinking about alcohol, right? I need to do some work to stop that obsession of thinking about alcohol. So I really need to do a whole bunch of work so that I could have some peace and I guess have some serenity with my sobriety. And I think I look at it way different today than I did when I first came in. It's just a totally different feeling.
I will say that for me, step 1 was the hardest. Step 0 and step 1. There's this thought process around a step 0 that I have to stop, and it's more than just stopping. So I found that when I decided to stop, the thing that was different is it came into my mind that the alcohol being removed from me was the least of my problems. Everything had to change. That was a big aha.
So Matt, what is step 0? I'm glad you brought that up. That's words of wisdoms from our friend Chip. But what, it's a 12-step program, steps 1 through 12. Where does 0 come in? What is 0?
To me, I think it's more about something has to change. This has to stop. I'm done with alcohol. I've had enough. I don't remember exactly what he said, but that's kind of how
it's that
take it.
Point in your life to where the jig is up, but you haven't surrendered yet. You haven't made a decision to stop drinking. All you know is you've reached that point in your life. You're at rock bottom. You have nowhere else to go, and you're done. You're just done. That's step 0. Step 1 is, is the surrender. It is, we admit it. We, that admittance part, those words, that word, I am an alcoholic. That is such a hard thing to say. It was for me, and, you get to that point in step 0 where you're just done. And then step 1, I am an alcoholic. You say it, you ring the bell, you accept it, and now you're off and you're on your journey to recover.
For me, step 1 is harder by magnitude of a lot than any other step. People think that step 5, having to actually tell another alcoholic all your inventory, is hard. People say that making those amends, there could be the hardest amends that you could make, to me, is still not harder than step 1, because step 1 is that I can't unring it bell. I can't put the toothpaste back in the tube. Once I say out loud to other people, I'm an alcoholic, you can't take that back. You could, but you're a fraud, which is why I never wanted to do that. Once you say that, then you can move forward. And it's very important to me to say I'm an alcoholic because it's freeing. Now I have labeled the problem. I know what it is. I've gone to a place of no return. I can't go back. And it commits me to move forward without having reverse. And there's another friend of ours who goes to another meeting who got sober, 17, 18. He had 30 years of sobriety and he was still a young man. And he had talked about, I didn't realize people could relapse. I didn't know that was an option. And I felt like that was, for me, the same thing. Why would I want to go to my first meeting? Why would I want to say I'm an alcoholic and then relapse? It's just way too hard to get there. And I know there's a lot of people who have a hard time with that idea of I'm an alcoholic. Well, whatever you want to use, but as long as you can label it that there's a problem here that I can't go back from, it really is something that's going to help you.
Yeah, well, the issue with saying that I'm an alcoholic, it's another way of saying that you're admitting that you can no longer drink safely. It's really, it's that problem that we have, especially early on for most of us. It's that vision that we can never, ever again safely have a drink of alcohol. And when you, especially in early sobriety, when you first walk into that room and when you're going to say that I'm an alcoholic, that's what you're admitting to. I cannot drink safely. And if I want to have, and again, for most of us at this point, we don't understand what's waiting for us on the other side, right? We just know that we have this problem and we just know that our life is unmanageable. So once I said that, they realize, like, I can never drink again. That's a hard thing to envision for somebody walking into the room. That's what makes that step so hard. Who the hell wants, for those of us who drank like that and who enjoyed alcohol for a long time and enjoyed what it did for us, probably not right at the end. None of us really were enjoying it right at the end, but for a long time did. Who wants to admit that we can never drink alcohol again? But that's where sobriety comes in. Right? I mean, understanding that sobriety is more than just a removal of alcohol, that you're adding something else to your life that's even better. That when you understand that that's waiting for you on the other side, then it becomes a more palatable, thing to say. And that's the hard thing for newcomers. It's a hard step. I don't know, when I first came in 95, I mean, I said it. But obviously, somehow 14 years later, I forgot it. And I'm not sure if I really bought into it back in that time, that I was going to not drink for the rest of my life. So
I've always heard that, there's people that, there's people that come into the rooms and they say the word, I'm an alcoholic. And then things change in their life, or they weren't 100% vested in the recovery, and they make a decision to go back out and drink again. Does that ruin your drinking? I mean, and I guess the question is to Steve, because you've lived that experience. Does it, knowing that you already rang the bell and went back out again, did it ruin your drinking, or did your drinking change?
Well, here's what happened when it happened to me. When it first happened to me, right, I lived a bit of a lie, right? I went out and had 3 beers, and at a sales, I was at a sales meeting, had 3 beers, and went, wow, I can have 3 beers. Look at that. I had 3 beers, went back up to my hotel room. Yeah, I can do this. And then even when I started drinking again, it wasn't so much it ruined my drinking, because my drinking was ruined when I came into there. Like, I knew I couldn't drink safely. I mean, I drank in my basement alone. Right? Like, that's before I came in. So it's like, I wasn't out having fun. I was in my basement drinking alone. So it didn't really ruin my drinking. My drinking was ruined before I got to AA the first time. I was a really, down. I was an alcoholic that, I wasn't out having fun drinking and doing that stuff. So it brought me right back to that place. And the only difference was, now I knew there was a solution. I knew, and before I came into the rooms, I didn't know anything about AA, and that's the only difference. Was like, I knew. So then at that point, I knew I was living a lie, right? Because I knew, like, okay, I know what I need to do to fix this. I just wasn't willing to do it at that point. So I mean, yeah, I guess it ruined my drinking somewhat, but I don't know. I was just drinking in my basement like I was before.
So what did you do different the second time?
Second time, like I said, I knew it. I just had hit to the point. I mean, I guess at one point I figured, something, I knew I was going to have to go back, right? I knew at some point, what happened to me is everything was crashing around, right? I've told it before, but my wife had gone to see the divorce attorney, and my whole life was about to crash again. And I was about ready to lose another family, another house. I got divorced, whatever it was, 10 years earlier. And as you know, John, you get really poor when you get divorced, really fast, instantly.
Yep.
Instantly poor. And I knew I didn't want to be there again. Like, I didn't want to be that. Like, I lived in a decent house, and I didn't want to be in a small apartment again and dig all out from that again. Plus, I was a lot older. I didn't have the time to recover from it. So I just knew that I was going to have to go back. And that time, I somewhat put myself back in the rooms with a little bit of a push from my wife. But I just knew I had to go back. And then I realized, well, if I wanted my life to change, then I really bought into the fact that I had to change.
I've seen some people on Instagram who, and others outside, that I see some behaviors that really kind of concern me. I know some people who are militantly not AAA people, and then I see some pictures of them wanting to be sober, and then I see them at a bar trying to be sober. or I see them pounding back non-alcoholic stuff, and I hear them ranting about depression and anxiety and stuff. And some of these people do go out and drink. Some of them don't, but I can't help but look at some of them and say, I don't know how sober you are that you're not drinking. And I don't say this to criticize. I say it to say, I feel like this is somebody in pain who doesn't need to be in the level of pain they're in.
Yeah, my first year, I still counted as part of my recovery. I still count that year, but I was dry. I didn't because I just quit drinking. I didn't say that I was an alcoholic, and I didn't say anything. I just quit drinking. And then, my friend Jack, the youngest old timer in the state of Connecticut, in his infinite wisdom, he gave me an Al-Anon schedule, and he said, "Hey, go try this." And that started me on my journey into 12-step recovery. And my first meeting was a month before my first year anniversary. But in my opinion, I was dry that year because I had made no changes at all. I just white knuckled it through, try to live life as best as I can, cope with everything in the world, with my marriage, with my kids, with my job, and try to make it through without, going and spending time with my best friend, alcohol. I don't know how I survived. I really don't. And there's a lot of people out there that, that I've worked with a little bit, that they've come into the rooms and they went out and decided to do things on their own. And I feel bad for those people because it's incredibly hard to try to do this by yourself. You need some sort of support network because, like we say in our introduction, you are not alone. We're in this leaky, sinking ship all together, all of us together, and we only have so many digits that we can put holes inside the boat to keep it from sinking. And we need other people's help in order to do that. When I first came in, I had so many holes in my boat. There was no way it was going to stay afloat without the help of other people. Now that I've been sober for a while, I can help somebody else out by lending them a hand and trying to plug some of their holes so they can keep above water so they don't drown. Because for me, that's what it was. When I was dry, I wasn't drinking, but I was still drowning in a sea of alcohol. It was all around me, and all I had to do was reach out and just grab it. And I could have done it at any time. And I can't explain why I didn't do it, because life was miserable for me that first year. It was unbearable. I did it out of just sheer spite that I wasn't going to fail, that, I quit drinking and I was going to be the victor. I would have eventually lost that battle because it would have gotten so bad and life would have gotten so miserable. I would have gotten a case of the efforts, and I would have said, screw this, it's not worth it. I'm just going to have a drink.
Go ahead. If you're new and you're hearing this, that you're not really hearing from us the idea of we quit drinking. This is how we're able to do things by slicing that part of our life out. I hope that you're hearing that we said, yes, we got rid of drinking, and then we addressed everything else. And addressing everything else put us into a place where it crowded out the need to drink. That's where I got to in terms of being sober. When I went by the liquor store for the first time and I realized I'm not curious about going in there anymore. What happened? And it took a long time for me to get to that point where it wasn't just about how do I tamp down the urge to not drink. It was, I don't need it because I'm realizing what alcohol was the crutch for. And I got to a root cause. If you go to a meeting, you're not going to find a group of people saying, how do we do this that we lessen the need to drink or drink less or have a chemistry class? It's about how are we addressing all the things about ourselves and how do we learn how to live our lives alcohol free? because for the most part, we're immature turds and we never grew up. We got that first 40 or whatever, and we never grew up at that point.
Absolutely.
Is that the technical term for it? Turd? Okay.
Yes. Yeah. No, I talked to Jill Teets, and she said biologists say a stupid turd is what you would find in the manual. And she showed me the picture, and it was a turd. And it had the lines, the smelly lines coming off.
Right.
It's great.
Right. Yeah. That sounds like what Jill would say. I mean, you're absolutely right, Matt. It's like, that's the whole point. Is we came into here just thinking about the alcohol, and then all of a sudden we learn that, and I think most of us will agree, and even those of you who may be out there listening, if you really look at your drinking, you'll find that you're drinking to cover something up, either feelings or insecurities. Well, mostly feelings. They're all feelings, but and when you think about that, we come here and then we address those things, and then we realize, well, wait a minute, if I could fix these things without drinking, then I don't need to drink. Then that drink doesn't have that much power to me. John, I just want to go back to something you said about white knuckling it. One of the guys from my Friday night meeting, Tommy C., who's no longer with us. Tommy was a great guy. I loved him a lot. And Tommy used to say, you know something? Sometimes he said, sometimes you can't underestimate that white knuckling it just for a while, right? You can't white knuckle it for a long time, but sometimes he used to call it getting mad dog mad, right? Like, just like you said, gritting your teeth and like, no, I am not going to drink. Just white knuckle it, mad dog. No, I'm not going to drink for that moment. And that's helpful at times. It's not good for long-term sobriety. I've never found
we are powerful people. There's just no question about it in my mind. And we are capable of doing just about anything. And when we set our minds to do something, we get that fierce determination. Bill talks about it, that fierce determination to win. And what
we just went through Bill's story.
And you get that thought in your head that there's nothing in life that's gonna get away. Damn it, I don't care what I gotta do, I'm gonna do it. And that's the way I felt when I decided to stop drinking. And that determination that we have, that energy, that focus, it's crazy. And sometimes, and you're right, I don't recommend that being part of your sobriety journey, is you have to white knuckle. It's not a prerequisite. But it does change you, when you're in there just fighting like a dog to stay sober, you remember how bad it was and how easy the 12 little steps can be.
Yeah. But also you have to have that fight sometimes, right? I mean, you just have to, right? I mean, you're not always, listen, it's interesting. I texted you guys. I wasn't feeling so hot tonight, and it's funny. I feel much better doing this podcast than I did before I sat down to do it. But sometimes you just don't have your A game, right? You're just not spiritually connected. You're not on the beam. But so sometimes you have to have other ways to survive tough times, especially early sobriety. We all know these guys who struggle with their sobriety and come and go for a bit, and it's not that they don't want to be sober.
Right.
Just that they struggle with it.
This ain't easy. This is not an easy journey.
No, but I want to end on a high note here, that if you're brand new and you can't think about how could you possibly live life without alcohol? How could I go to a wedding or my daughter's wedding or my own wedding or go to a social event and not drink? And then you're selling me a bill of goods that you're not going to drink and not miss it? Are you guys high? No, we're not high anymore. The issue here is there's a new way of living that you can live, whether it's AA or however you do it. There are things you can do with help that crowds that out. I promise you it's available if you research it. I want to go over the new reviews that we got in because we got 3 this week. That's the most we've ever had. All 5-star reviews.
Thank you.
All fantastic. I swear I didn't pay these people. I found your podcast hearing Matt a few times on another podcast. I looked for You Are Not Alone a few times and wasn't ready for another recovery podcast. Now, this is my binge show, and I'm telling others in my meetings about it. Thanks for changing the name as it reflects what the show is. Glad that you picked that up. Sober Friends Podcast. This is Carter, Best Dog. Carter Best Dog. I'm looking at that for the fourth time. I'm like, did I read that right? I appreciate and learn from each podcast episode. Listening is helpful to my recovery. That is Jay Kendon. And the last one says, awesome podcast. Of course it is. Matt J., host of You Are Not Alone, a recovery podcast. Not the name anymore. Highlights all addiction, recovery, and more in this Can't Miss podcast.
Wow.
With me.
Wow.
The host and expert guests, you guys are experts, offer insightful advice and information that is helpful to anyone that listens. This is Ro Iori's from the Philippines.
Holy cow.
Wow.
And this is why we do this, because if we help one person, it makes it worthwhile. And here we go. We hit the trifecta. 3 people that we have made an impact on. It's unbelievable. I mean, this is cool stuff.
I will say this. I wouldn't claim to be an expert on much, but I am an expert on being a drunk and finding recovery. And I do claim that as an expertise.
So if you like the podcast, go into Apple, give us a 5-star review. Give us your honest feedback as it helps us craft the show. In Spotify, you can now put stars and you can rate it. Go ahead and do that. You can reach out on Instagram at SoberFriendsPod, at the website SoberFriendsPod.com. I finally fixed the email, Matt at SoberFriendsPod.com. I love coffee. Do you love coffee? If you want to buy us a coffee so that we can afford to do this and get it in the new guy's ear, it's buymeacoffee.com/SoberFriendsPod.
We are nonprofit.
Great episode.
Can't stress that enough. We are not for profit. All the donations go back to the equipment because it's very expensive for us to bring this show to the people that are been sober forever or just starting off, or just, like we say, sober curious. Thank you for your donations.
Yeah, we just want this to sound better and be the most professional thing possible. To have the audio file hosted, there's a cost for that. There's a cost for doing remote broadcasting well. There's a cost for the website. Everything has a cost, even if it's little. They start to add up. We're happy to front those costs, but hey, if you can help us out a little bit, this is the thing. If you find that the show adds value to you, give what you think it's worth.
Amen.
If you can't, then you can share it with somebody else. But if you think it's worth something, you determine what it's worth to you. Guys, have a great week.
Thanks, man.
We'll see you next week.
You made it this far into the podcast. That tells me you're a pretty big fan. If you like what we do and you find value in the podcast, consider a donation at buymeacoffee.com/SoberFriendsPod. Your donation keeps us on the air to help out the new guy and helps us defray some of our costs. If you find value in our podcast, please consider a donation at buymeacoffee.com/SoberFriendsPod.